At this point in the market, I don't think there are a lot of XRP bulls. If you're still positive about XRP right now, you're pretty much the only person left. Almost everyone has turned very negative about its price action. Also, I've said this a lot of times, but I'll say it again. Now is really not the time to be a bear. That's what I mean, because if you take a step back and look at the bigger picture, almost everything shows that things are going to get better. One of the most important things to notice about the XRP chart right now, even on the daily time frame, is that the RSI has been showing a positive divergence since October 10th. Prices have been going down steadily during that whole time. You don't want to see this, but you do believe it. You want prices to drop to lower lows as momentum starts to shift slowly. You want to be upset. You want to be bored. You need people to give up. That's how reversals start. Right now, everyone is very pessimistic and mood is breaking down. However, there is still bullish divergence. There's no chance in that. We already have our low on the 24-hour chart, and it looks like we may be starting to print higher lows. This is called bullish structure. When that weekly light goes out, we'll be able to look at it again with a lot more clarity. Having said that, I think that most altcoin numbers are way too low right now. The market's mood makes that even more important. Everything is getting worse. Everyone is getting impatient. Price cuts are being asked for by everyone. That's not how tops have formed in the past. That is how bottoms are made. If we look at data on how people feel about XRP on social media, it has fully entered the extreme fear zone. After a nearly 19% drop from the highs on January 5th, retail traders are becoming more pessimistic. And this is what you need to know. In the past, when people say very negative things about a stock, the price usually goes against what people expect. We see over and over that the crowd is wrong when they are very emotional. Usually, this is when you want bad feelings to take over the story, because that's when big changes start to happen most of the time. This has happened before with XRP. Fear has fully taken over at times, and everyone wrote off the asset. Then all of a sudden, the price went through the roof in a very short amount of time. There's even information that points to this exact plan. Headlines like XRP is gripped by extreme fear, which is the same signal that caused 600% rises in the past. In the past, smart money has entered when there was a fear among the crowd. That's not a view. That's a pattern. It's not smart to chase green candles with your money. It builds up when feelings are hurt and trust is lost. I clearly remember cycles in the past when most people felt bad about XRP. During those times, I kept making content even though most people had already mentally checked out. What always interested me was how loud the negative comments were when prices were low and how quiet they became when prices started going up. They initially question it when the breakout starts. They claim that the move is fake and that it will be sold off. They also say that everyone is being too dramatic. After that, the price keeps going down and down and down until you stop seeing them at all. They won't show up again until the next slowdown, which is when everything goes back to zero. It takes place every turn. That's why how people feel about something is so important. It shows you where strong emotions are. Of course, feelings right now are mostly fear and anger. We need to talk about the big picture now because this is where a lot of people miss the bigger picture. Charges. We got the news about the tariffs last week. That's why the prices of gold and silver have been going up. That's also why crypto has been under a lot of stress. Crypto is very sensitive to how much money is available. When there is a lot of doubt, money gets tight, and risky assets are the first to feel it. When people talk about trade wars, the market instantly remembers times when there wasn't enough money to go around and there was a lot of instability. Crypto is likely to stay unstable until we have more information or at least less doubt about taxes and policy direction. That's not the same as bearish. It means in between. And it is during transitional times that accumulation takes place. That's why, despite all the noise, fear, and bad news, I keep my attention on structure, emotion, and the bigger picture. Because these things don't make the market look like it's ending right now. It looks like the market is quietly fixing itself before the next phase of growth. When tariffs were taken off the table, the market went crazy. That was the big worry that had been hanging over everything since January of last year. When we look more closely at what's been affecting markets, tariffs, and the chance of a trade war getting worse have always been the main worry. That's been the main cause of doubt. Based on where the market is at the moment, things seem to be pretty calm. The size of the whole crypto market is still around $3 trillion. The price of Bitcoin is still close to $90,000. The price of XRP is still around $195. It doesn't look like anything is broken. It doesn't look like anything is falling apart. We've just been given a pretty big news. After coming to a new long-term deal with Greenland and NATO, Trump said that the EU tax plan that was supposed to go into effect on February 1st had been canceled. He made it very clear that he never wanted to go to war with Denmark. Only a trade war was an option. He went so far as to say, "I don't see us fighting with Denmark." Thanks a lot to All in Crypto for sharing this clip. This is a very important event for markets. Trump made it clear in the video that the tariffs are off and that nothing is happening on February 1st. He said that the tariffs were taken away because it looks like they've pretty much made an agreement. He said it was a deal involving control and long-term cooperation. He also said it was complicated and that more information would be given later. Besides that, he said that the talks included NATO's Secretary General and that it was exactly the deal he wanted to make. When asked if Denmark had a say in this deal, Trump said that he thought they did because they are represented by NATO leadership and talks have been held with everyone involved. He was also asked about mineral rights, control, and his role in defense projects like the Golden Dome. He didn't say much more than that, but he did say that both sides would work together on mining rights and defense issues, but when the word forever was used, that's what stood out. Trump said that the deal was a long-term, permanent agreement, stressing that it wasn't a short-term deal like other foreign agreements. He made it clear that this deal was meant to last by comparing it directly to other ones that had been made. He also said again that Greenland was talked about a lot in his speech because it was so important to security and that this deal made things even safer than they were before. When asked again if force was ever an option, Trump said that he had never officially ruled out force, but he didn't see this turning into a military war either. In fact, it was always about trade power, which is what the markets wanted to hear. The biggest worry was that the trade war would get worse and into a bigger one. It takes away a lot of uncertainty to hear that the tariffs are gone, and that talks led to a long-term deal. This is why the nervousness that had been there for a few days started to go away almost right away. It was a big relief when the 10% taxes were taken away. The real question now is whether this stays the main point. Does this last until at least February 1st, or is there going to be another surprise news that changes everything again? At this point, that's the only thing that could still throw the markets off. The news is already having an impact on our lives. Both gold and silver have started to move backwards a little. These are hardly big changes. Gold is down about $100, and silver is down about $2 to $3 an ounce. Not anything exciting, but the direction is important. In this case, gold and silver were used to protect against the risk of tariffs and trade wars. When that risk goes away, money starts moving out of those defense positions. This swing is important because it shows us where money might next go. Risk assets will do well if doubt keeps going away. Crypto is part of that. We still need to be careful, though. We've seen this before. Policies can become less clear very quickly, especially when trade talks are going on. Trump has made snap decisions in the past, and the markets are well aware of that. This is a good sign, but you shouldn't jump to conclusions about it until you have more information. As long as this story stays true, though, Bitcoin should start to go up. A bigger change in the market should happen. Right now, when we look at the Bitcoin picture, the structure does look solid. Overall, things are still going up, and RSI is also still going up. That's exactly what you want to see if the market is getting ready for distribution rather than continuation. The main thing I'm keeping an eye on with Bitcoin is a return to the 90.2K to 90.5K mark, especially on the daily time frame. That area is very important. It used to be a resistance place that needs to become support again. Once the daily close is above that level, the chances of continuing to rise are much higher. I will then watch the next key level, which is between 94K and 94.2K. It would be possible for Bitcoin to challenge previous highs again if it could cleanly take back that zone. As soon as we break through those levels, the next obvious goal is the highs from January 14th, which are around 97.8K. Let's just call it 98K for ease of use. If Bitcoin can get back to those levels with volume and proof, the story of the market as a whole will change very quickly. At that point, fear changes into doubt. There is a change from not believing to accepting, and from accepting to moving forward. That's how these moves usually go. At this point, we just need to wait. We're keeping an eye on changes in policy, changes in funding, and key technical levels. The removal of the tariff takes away a big problem. If nothing new comes up that makes things worse, the road of least resistance starts to tilt back up. If this continuation goes as planned, there should be a much bigger rise across the market after that. Before there is a real drop, Bitcoin should be able to push toward 100,000 or even 106,000. And if that slowdown does happen, I think it will go back to previous highs to set a higher floor before the trend starts to move forward again. That kind of building would be very good for you. And if that happens, it sets the stage for a strong trend that should last through about the first quarter of 2019. This should also help altcoins return in a big way. I do think that's when we'll finally see a real alt season style move. That's because for the most part, this cycle didn't really have an alt season. A lot of people like to say that altcoins have already run or that alt season happened in 2024 and 2025. But if you look more closely, you'll see that only a few coins really had parades that meant something. In comparison to what we've seen in previous full alt seasons, I would say that most altcoins did not do nearly as well. If someone says we already had a real alt season, they are either not looking at the data or pushing a negative story on purpose to get people to engage, fear, or click. When you look at all of them together, most altcoins did not have the kind of dramatic rise we usually see during alt season. It's important to note that many of them didn't even reach new highs. Take the case of XLM. That chart is very flat when you look at it. We did get back up after the lows, but that's not what alt season looks like. All-time highs are broken during a real alt season. You see how prices are found. You can see how exponential moves. And for most of the market, that just didn't happen. When you look at Solana, which is one of the assets that has done the best this cycle, it is only slightly above its previous highs. If you look at the ends, you can see that there wasn't any real growth after the highs in 2021. We never really got into price discovery. Sure, the performance was good compared to other times, but it wasn't the breakout we've seen in the past. Ethereum has a story like this. We saw a move back to the highs from 2021. We traded around those levels for a short time, but we never got a clear break. We never saw prices stay above those highs for a long time. That's important because Ethereum breaks into price discovery first, then the rest of the market does too. This is not advice about money. If you compare Ethereum to its all-time high in 2017, 2018, you'll see that once that level was broken, the price didn't just stop going up. It kept going up by over 300%. There's no promise that Ethereum will go up another 300% from here, but even a 100% move would put it around $9,400. That kind of move would definitely wake up the altcoin market, especially ERC20 tokens. That's why I think there will be a much bigger blowout event soon, one that looks more like a real alt season than just a few pumps and a few coins. If Ethereum breaks out correctly, capital should simply flow into other cryptocurrencies. After that, those huge moves start to happen all over the place. But, and this is very important, that can only happen if we can keep tariffs on imports and market volatility low. Crypto is very sensitive to how much money is available. It also reacts very badly to big shocks. I've talked a lot about this. There isn't much liquidity in crypto. A big part of the market is based on borrowing money. So any big news, any surprise story, or any hasty choice, especially from someone like Trump, can send the market sailing off course right away. That's why I'm keeping a close eye on this situation. This is another reason I've been focusing on standard signs of risk. The Russell 2000 has been something that stands out. It just made a new all-time high this morning. Bull theory says it's up about 9% in the first 21 days of 2026. That's a strong message. It shows that money is moving from low-risk assets to high-risk ones. And in the past, when small caps started to do better than large caps, risk-on behavior followed. As long as that rotation keeps going and macro worries stay low, crypto is expected to do very well. Plus, it's not just Bitcoin. That includes other coins. It could happen on a much bigger scale than what we saw in 2024 and 2025. That's why this setup makes me happy. We can't get too far ahead of ourselves, though. We need to be sure. All of the breaks need to be clean, and we need to avoid big events that cause uncertainty, like sudden tariff news or trade wars that get worse. In all honesty, the market only needs about 6 months of steadiness. There hasn't been a big trade war news story in 6 months. After 6 months, there have been no nasty tariff shocks. If we get that, the chance of a long-term risk to the world goes up by a huge amount. That being said, I'm also honest. From what we've seen in the past year, making sudden announcements is always a risk. This weekend's news, quick changes in tone, unexpected comments about policy. There have been a lot of these things. That's why we need to be careful, open-minded, and focused on facts rather than feelings.